Masterbooks look at the curriculum as a tool. So you're the carpenter. If you came to the house and you're going to build a house, you're going to look for the right tools to do the job. What is the goal then of academics? Well, the goal is that a student knows how to learn, enjoys learning, is able to focus long enough to learn, learns, begins to put together concepts and things like that, and that they're in a continual learning mode. In the younger grades especially, Masterbooks philosophy is if you push a student too early with too much rigor, too much academics, too much drill and kill, you're ignoring large parts of that child, who they are holistically. And so do they really need to do an hour of math every day in first grade? Or could they do a little bit at a time and then have room for discovery, creativity, and play? We have nations like Finland who are excelling academically above the United States because they don't even start school until age 7. What do? They read to their students, they encourage creativity, and they encourage play in those grades. And then knowing that when you develop a whole student that at age 7, they're going to be ready to begin reading and developing very quickly. And so they're not worried about stunting the student by not going aggressively early on. We have a lot of newer families to homeschooling, and some of the comments that we see, just misperceptions or the paradigm. A paradigm is multiple ways of looking at things. I've done a video before in the past where when you look at one image, what you'll see is an old woman and her nose and kind of a hat, and then you flip it around, if you can see it, the same image, you'll be able to see an older, a young woman with her hat and her shoulder and that. And so there's paradigms that we see, and sometimes we can get very tunnel visioned and focused into one way of doing things. So hey, it's fun to see all of you commenting in the app. Carissa, Minduso, Jess, Vicky, Barbara, and then we've got a couple coming in also to Facebook. We got Kelsey and Brandy. It's nice to have everybody here. While I'm talking, let me know if you've started school. Have you started school? On a scale of 1 to 10, how's your school year going? Love to see that. So the paradigms we can get stuck into is that we have one way of looking at things. For those of us who went to a public school or a private school, we're used to a certain paradigm of education. It's a checklist-based education. It says you're going to learn this, and this, and then we're going to test you, and when you're done, we're going to move on to the next thing. And we're not going to necessarily do a lot of thinking. We're not going to do a lot of exploring or experimentation. We're not going to give a lot of opportunity for development outside of the academic realm. Homeschooling, real-world homeschooling, if you've been homeschooling for any period of time, or what we think we've worked towards over the last 20 years, is more of a total child development where you have the academic, and that's important because they're learning things about the world that they're in, and it's going to be valuable to them. But you also have the spiritual growth of the student. You have the emotional intelligence of the student that needs to develop and grow. You want them to develop a love of learning and critical thinking skills. And the world has changed. Years ago, you wanted to get as much information as you could, become an expert, and so you packed everything you could into your brain, and then that was an indication of how valuable you were to the world. I don't believe that that's the world we live in anymore. I think the world that we live in now is a world that has access to all the information, and we want to be able to access the information and to use it intelligently to develop critical thinking skills and to have emotional intelligence. if you're in social media, which obviously you are, if you're watching this, you realize emotional intelligence is something society needs, right? Sometimes, like, how much energy is spent on things that just don't matter, and how much reacting do we do to things we can't control, and those type of things. So when we're talking about an education, we want to look at the whole child, and academics is certainly part of that. Now, what is the goal then of academics? Well, the goal is that a student knows how to learn, enjoys learning, is able to focus long enough to learn, learns, begins to put together concepts and things like that, and that they're in a continual learning mode. And by that, I think they're going to learn certain things that they build upon. In math, you have to learn addition before you learn multiplication. And so there are certain building or stepping stones that you have. In other subjects like science, how can you possibly know all that there is? So when we take a book like life science is intensely vast. I mean, there's so much information that a student can learn. So what we are doing is we're gaining information, we're developing knowledge, we're building on that knowledge. But a lot of what we see tends to be the paradigm shifts in the lower grades, especially. Let's see, just wanted to see, sounds like Barbara says, sounds like a conversation my husband and I had, to be able to think critically, a love for reading, a love for learning. Yep, 4 weeks post-summer break, currently 6.5 out of 10. Started last week, graded so far, interrupted by a hurricane. Yeah, that wasn't much fun. Started on 28th, had 2 different grades, so don't know how the day's going. That's good. And in the Facebook, Carlos Lynn says, hi, we're loving the start of the school year. Julia, surprisingly well, finished our 3rd week, only a few days in so far. Good. In the younger grades especially, masterbooks philosophy is, if you push a student too early with too much rigor, too much academics, too much drill and kill, you're ignoring large parts of that child, who they are holistically. And so do they really need to do an hour of math every day in 1st grade? Or could they do a little bit at a time and then have room for discovery, creativity, and play? Those are things that we hold valuable, because study after study after study has shown that students need play. Students need to crawl. There are studies that show that if students don't know how to crawl, they'll be stunted academically later on, because certain parts of the brain are connecting. I mean, we have nations like Finland who are excelling academically above the United States because they don't even start school until age 7. What do? They read to their students, they encourage creativity, and they encourage play in those grades. And then knowing that when you develop a whole student, that at age 7, they're going to be ready to begin reading and developing very quickly. And so they're not worried about stunting the student by not going aggressively early on. For some reason in the American academic system, we think that do more. So at age 4, we're going to start forcing students to have to learn skills faster. Like, by somehow training them earlier is going to help them be smarter and going to help the school, the outcomes improve, which they don't, because you're ignoring the students' need to develop. And so with curriculum, something that we think is very important, I've said it before and taught on this, but because we have new families and whatnot, I just wanted to touch on it, is with masterbooks, look at the curriculum as a tool. So you're the carpenter. If you came to the house and you're going to build a house, you're going to look for the right tools to do the job. And you're not going to allow the tools to dictate how you do that. Not everything you do in building is going to be accomplished by a hammer. Some are going to need a saw, or vice versa. So you want to be able to choose the tools that are best for the student. Now when we use estimations. It's something I say with Master Books, and see, this is what's hard. We have a mass market. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of people this year who've chosen Master Books curriculum. Okay, many people come from, a paradigm of a classroom-based education. And so when they look at Master Books, it's like, where do I even start? So we've taken the kind of averages and said, okay, for third grade, this is what most people end up with. For second grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, this is what the people use. And so you buy a subject and you're thinking, okay, so this should work with my third grader. The problem you have with most third graders is there's a vast difference in third graders. Even from the beginning of third grade year to the end of third grade year, you have a vast difference. In fact, we wouldn't even recommend doing standardized testing with a third grader, just because they're developing so many skills at the front end and then and maturing so much at that transitional period. So with that, especially we say with Master Books, we love placement tests or the readiness guides. We love saying, we're more level based than we are grade based. So if your student is struggling with a topic, then chances are, if they're really applying themselves, maybe they just need to go back a level because that would help them. Or maybe it's too easy and they need to go, they can work more rapidly through it if they need to build confidence in that and then go forward. So use the resources in Master Books more as a tool. Assess each child as an individual. Okay, let me go this way. Sometimes when we approach a problem, it's good to say, if I had no answers, like I didn't know what I know, and I came up to this problem today, how would I solve it? If I was going to create an internet business, how would I do that today? And the answers would be vastly different than the answers I brought forward from when I was in internet e-commerce 20 years ago. You have to approach it differently. So when we approach our children, we have to approach it from, okay, let's approach this child as an individual. What do we know? Where are we? And then how can we customize this to fit the student's needs? And sometimes we need to choose a different curriculum level or a different approach. And sometimes we just need to cut back a little bit. So let me see. Homeschooling has been such an eye-opener for how different each child learns, for sure, Mary says. Vicky says, daughter has problems with borrowing and subtracting. We use place values to show it to her. She got it suddenly. See, every approach, even why we recommend Math Antics as a video channel, has nothing to do with Master Books, but it's a channel we've looked at and approved. Some students just do well with somebody else explaining it in a different way. Let's see, okay. Brandy says, I'm loving it. First year, started August 10th. Awesome to hear that, Brandy. Julia, surprisingly well. Finished our third week. Only a few days so far. That's awesome, right? And keep in mind that life gives us easy and it gives us hard. And so some days are going to be hard. That's normal. Doesn't matter what we do. We just set the expectation there. She says, so good. I'm German. We only start school at age 7 too. And that's one of the reasons I love Master Books, because short hours means lots of play. Like in public school in Germany, we only have 3 hours of school a day. Let's see. Okay, so with Julia also asks about testing. I think testing I think it's different for every family, every student. With a Charlotte Mason approach, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of, can you narrate back to me what we've learned? Can you tell me what we've learned about, like, if you're going to give a test or a quiz that's, what did this say, fill in the blank type thing. I don't know that that's always a good indication of whether or not a student learned how to apply and use the knowledge they have. It may be an indication of, do they recall that knowledge? but I don't know that it's going to be an indication of do they know how to apply it. I have a couple of things I'm going to go to God's Design for Life, because that's one of the textbooks that is in a transitional year, and some parents love it and some parents struggle. I think it's more the paradigm in it, and so I just want to address the paradigm. Anybody who's watching that's been used the curriculum, feel free to weigh in. One mom in the Facebook group says, just a note from a seasoned homeschool mama who is new to masterbooks. We love this feedback. If your child is used to learning, if your child is used to how learning is structured in public school environment, he or she may feel like the work is easy or that it's already know all of it. However, if you've used the placement test to determine the correct levels of your books, rest assured that it's not too easy. Masterbooks is an entirely different approach to learning and may be a shock to the system for some. It's designed to foster curiosity and a love of learning, as well as allow space for additional exploration of topics and interests. It's designed not to take hours and hours, but your kids may be used to slogging through problem after problem and worksheet after worksheet. That doesn't mean they learn more, it just means they sat and did more longer. I would suggest trying to relax the expectation a bit and understand that homeschooling is not designed to be school at home. There is much more to it, and the relationship you'll foster with your children is a huge part of that. Enjoy them, watch them learning, and explore God's world. You won't be sorry. I love that, because that is Masterbooks. Masterbooks is, listen, one of the friction points is kids learning to take a test and then having no recall of it anyways. Let's talk about these things that we're learning. Let's recall them. Let's discuss them as a family. Let's use the knowledge that we're gaining, because that's how real learning works. If you and I did a Bible study or a book, we did a book club, and I said, hey, this is the book we're going to do. What we would do, let's read it, let's find application and takeaways, let's discuss it and how we would apply it to our lives. We're going to get more than if I said, why don't you go read this chapter, and when you come back, I'm going to give you a quiz. And I'm going to see, that quiz is going to indicate whether or not you understand the material that's in that book. And maybe you can pass that test. Maybe you'd be able to be one who would be like, oh, these are the questions, and I write down the answers, and I've memorized that, so I can pass that. The question is, do you understand the spirit of the work? Do you understand the author's intent? Are you able to use that knowledge in context of your own life? And that's something that we want our students to do. As we learn about math, we want them to learn about how to use the skills and develop the skills in math, but we also want them to understand what math is and why math is important and how to use it in the context of their own lives. It's what I love about math lessons for a living education. You're learning about math like a big word problem in the context of the real world. So it makes sense because it fits. When we cook a pie and we learn about doubling up fractions, or we learn about how 3/4 of a cup and half a cup works, and we're practically using that as opposed to just numbers on a page, that information is so much more valuable. It's knowledge in context. Okay, so when we come to something like God's Design. Now, God's Design is designed for 3rd grade through 8th grade, so there's a wide range that you can use it in. One of the reasons is that you could use it with multiple students. So if you had a 6th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader, you'd be able to do this as a family all together. Some of the activities are designed to be a little bit higher level for the older students, and some are designed to be lower. Life is placed in our 3rd grade set, which again is a transitional grade. And I would say if you purchase Life, the content in Life is phenomenal. Sometimes for some students, the activities and the questions could be a little bit overkill. Libby, who is one of our moderators in the Moms of Master Books, answered a question recently, and she said, we did God's Design for Life last year. I would read the lesson aloud and we'd talk about it. We didn't do the worksheets because she just wasn't ready for them. For the activities, we would pick and choose. The lessons aren't dependent on activities, so you don't need to feel pressured to do them at all. So that's one where, maybe you use just certain activities, or you use this as a discussion guide rather than a worksheet that the student has to fill out. And allow yourself to modify this as a tool, right? If I have a hammer, sometimes I use a hammer to break things and smash things. Sometimes I use a hammer to pound a nail in. Sometimes I use a hammer to pull the nail out. You're creative with the tools that you have. Don't be locked into the curriculums. Like, have an understanding. Okay, a third grader, what we're going to talk about is life science. I want them to understand plants and animals and the human body. And maybe we're going to go slow. Maybe we don't need to do it that fast. We can read, we can talk about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, sit down, we're going to do this book, we're going to answer these questions, we're going to take a test in 2 weeks. If you pass the test, great. And that's an assessment that we know what we're doing and we move forward. Some people may really enjoy that system because it feels very validating that we've learned something, even though we're not able to actually use that information. I was one of those students that could study for a test. I would take the test, I would forget the information, and it never meant anything to me. As I've gotten older, I can't recall, like if I'm reading one of Israel's books, Pitching a Fit, I can't recall specific quotes or things like that, but I get the concepts and I get the takeaways. I'll often in my books make notes, right? So that's something that somebody could do. You could actually say, all right, we're going to do this, and we're going to get a notebook, and maybe we're just going to make notes about the things that we've learned, and we can apply and discuss as a family. I mean, you can be creative with curriculum, and that goes for every curriculum. If you've got a curriculum where there's a lot of drill and kill and it's just crushing your student, cross off every other problem. If they show competency and they can do 5 problems, why do they have to do 50 problems? Because it's on a page? Like, that's a sad way to live life, right? We don't operate that way as adults. So we can be creative and give ourselves permission to use the tools that best suit the needs of the student. I love to learn. Details just don't come easy for me, but concepts do. When it comes to orders in the warehouse, one of my jobs right now at the warehouse, and let me say this, thank you to all of you who are so patient and supportive of the warehouse team. Our crew is working so hard. They are so beat. We have had such a significant increase in sales, and they're working overtime, long hours. Everybody, the CEO, the CFO, I've been down there working. So many people are working hard down there, and we just appreciate the support. We're trying to get your orders out as quickly as possible. Chances are, if you have an order that has an error, like a book came through and you got the wrong thing, it's probably my fault because I'm the one who's checking. So the puller goes and pulls the orders off the shelves, puts them in a bin. The checker comes and goes through and checks and makes sure that all the books that are in the bin matched the order. And then it goes down a roller rack to somebody who packs it and gets it ready. I'm just not a detail person. As hard as I try, I'm present. I will go through it and I will try as hard as I can. And thankfully, we have another system that weighs the package, and so we know the weight of the book and the weight of the package. So the weight of the order should match, but sometimes it doesn't. It's too close. Every now and then, I get called out and they yell my name and make a big fuss because I should know better and made a mistake. Now, that's my struggle, the detail, like that, okay? But as I'm sitting down there, I'm able to look at the whole picture, the macro picture, and say, they're spending a lot of time doing this, and we could be more efficient if we did this. The processes and the big picture is how I see the world, and it's how I move through the world. It's like there's feelings and colors through each process that we can optimize. The micro, I'm just not good at. You'd never want me to proofread your letter to somebody because, well, when Kristen proofreads, she sees things immediately that I'll never see. And sometimes even after she sees it, I'm like, I don't get it. What's the problem? So that's just something that our students are different like this too. And so as we learn and we grasp concepts, it doesn't always have to be that they can memorize the micro. Can they pull away the big concepts for some students and then enjoy talking about it and playing it? One thing I'll say too with God's Design for Life, if you picked it up in 3rd grade and it feels like maybe it's a little overkill for your student, You could still use the textbook, and there is a schedule, but the Life for Beginners, pick this up to go along with it. It simplifies things a little bit more, so it's just a little bit, some people will use this for third grade instead, if their student is in that transitional spot. So you might get a lot out of it by just picking up the Life for Beginners, even if you got the digital and printed off the worksheets that went along with the some of the lessons that are in Life. And I think there's, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that there's a coordination schedule for Life with Beginners and Life. So, okay, I think I got everything that I wanted. Hopefully, if there's any comments or feedback or questions, I'll stay on just a little bit longer. One of the things with Master Books that I love is, I say it's common sense homeschooling. It's looking at a child and say, hey, we're going to learn about science and math and language and our history, but we're going to do it from a common sense approach. We don't need to just do this list-based education. We can start really looking at tailoring an education to the student's interest. Maybe they love sea animals. So good, let's study sea animals. Let's spend some time doing, elementary zoology or even some studies at those levels. Especially in elementary, you're giving them some foundations, but they're going to cover this again. Like life science, if you cover that in third grade, you're probably going to cover something similar to that again. Well, definitely in biology, and when they hit high school, they're going to cover it again at a much deeper level as well. Although there's a lot of high school biology courses, I think, that don't teach as well or as interesting as this. So, okay. Let's see. Thank you, everybody, for the love of our crew down there. They are awesome. We have some moms who've come in, local moms who've come in, or they drive about an hour and a half and will work. They have donated time, just to help, and they've been a huge help, but they're overwhelmed seeing how many books are being shipped out. And we've actually created extra shipping stations. We have 2 extra shipping stations that we're manning just to try to get orders out in a timely manner. And Master Books is actually doing pretty well. I've seen reports where some companies are like a week or 2 weeks behind where Master Books is. If a company isn't, chances are they're either really efficient or not as effective this year. Because if you're selling homeschool curriculum in the market, they say the market has possibly gone from 2.5 million to 7.5 to 10 million people. So it'll be interesting to see every time school starts. Like we had the first group that started like the second week of August. About a week later, we see a little surge where there's been, COVID breakout, and then the third week we had a little surge, and then right now we're on, I think it was the 18th of August. The 17th, 18th, and 19th were the 3 busiest days we've ever had, and so once we get through those, then the orders start to go down a little bit, which is what we would expect. So hopefully we can start catching some things up. Yeah, we're certainly trying as hard as we can, and our goal this year is really to come alongside new families and help just help families be more successful with homeschooling. Their homeschooling is so rewarding. If you're on the edge, if you just started homeschool and it feels like it isn't working for you, don't give up. Don't give up. It's so rewarding, and it just needs tweaked. You just have to tweak it, or find a mentor who can help you, or figure out what it is that's happening. Once you kind of find a rhythm that works for your family, oh my goodness! As a dad who is homeschooled, our family is homeschooled for about 25 plus years. We have 5 that have graduated, and my son, one of my sons this summer, is working in the warehouse, and I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of the way that he holds himself. I'm proud of the way that he interacts with others. I'm proud of the work ethic that he has. Yeah, and I know that, that he's been able to be right alongside us as we do life together. And last night, with my son, I'm always growing and learning, and I've had new epiphanies, and so I'm telling him, here's an epiphany I've got, and he's got excellent feedback that he's given back to me, and I'm able to interact with him at 15 years old like he's an adult who's so mature that I can get good feedback from. That's a lifestyle, and when they're young and you're struggling with, dirty diapers and messy houses and people with expectations and all the things that life is bringing, you don't always understand that these are seeds we're sowing, and the fruit of these seeds is going to come back, and it's so good, it's so rewarding, and it's worth it. It's worth fighting through it. Get that mentality. Failure is not an option. Maybe I have the wrong tools for the job. Maybe I just need to adjust some things, growth hack it a little bit. But failure is not an option because my kids are too valuable. They're too important to give up on. Okay. Good. Well, let's see. Julia says, we really enjoyed God's Design with my first and third grader. My third wants to become a scientist, so I read the normal one to them. I feel they mention things just randomly from what they got. And we've had so much fun with notebooking, hands-on activities. I choose from the teacher guide whatever I think she can get. Good idea how to test Charlotte Mason style. That's something I had to hear. Awesome feedback. That's you're taking a tool and you're using it to build the student that you have. I've said often, right? Love the students you have, not the students you wish you had. And part of that is stepping back and being willing to try new things to serve your student. And that's a new concept. Serving your student is a new concept. So, okay. Vicky says, someone told me give homeschool 2 years before you give up. Never use the first year as an example of how things will be. Very wise advice. First year is the hardest year, especially as your paradigms are shifting and the family is getting used to things. It helps if you have some mentors. If you find some people who can mentor you a little bit, that's a great way because they've probably been there. They've probably dealt with a mother-in-law who doesn't have, who isn't supportive. They've probably dealt with the wrong curriculum at the wrong time. They've dealt with seasons of life. Those things are all valuable to keep in mind. So, okay. Hey guys, hope it was a blessing to you. And again, thank you for being part of this community. We thank you for your business and the support of Master Books. We thank you for being part of the communities and encouraging other moms. When you see another mom who needs encouragement or just loved on, what I love about this community is you could be isolated in any part of the world, and when you post a picture of your kids, other moms come in and will give affirmation and love and support. That's what we really desire with Moms of Master Books and the app especially because we're much more able to give freedom for conversation. We've explained why in the past and be happy to do that again if I had to. Okay, good. And Brittany is in the warehouse. Brittany is right now having to do, she's key because one other person is out, so Brittany can't be spared to come up and help me. And believe me, Brittany would much rather be here than where she is. So, all right, guys, God bless you. And we are so appreciative and thankful for this community. It is an honor and a blessing to serve you. We'll talk to you later.